Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum students. So class 7th. Today we are going to start our 4th unit, that is living organisms and their environment. What is ecology? It is the study of how organisms interact with their environment. How their living and non-living sectors of the environment react with the organism. How do they develop and grow in the existing conditions? If we study science, we move on from the smallest unit to the largest unit. And the smallest unit of study in living things is the cell. When two or more cells of same type combine, they form a tissue. When tissues of same type and category combine, they form an organ. For an example, heart, liver, brain. Then the organ with its entire system is known as an organ system. For example, digestive system, nervous system, urinary system, etc. Those systems unite in an individual known as an organism. When two or more organisms live in an area where they interbreed and produce fertile offsprings, that group is known as a population. When two or more populations combine, they form a community. And when more than two communities combine, they develop an ecosystem. And ecosystems all together living on the land and water area is known as our biosphere, where life exists on our planet Earth. So the environment is basically everything surrounding us. It has two parts, the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. Biotic means living and abiotic means non-living. So there are different kinds of species that survive in our environment. Every species survives because they have a home. The home of every species known as its habitat. The habitat of fish is water, oceans, rivers, lakes. Our habitat is our home. So the concept of ecology is that all the organisms living in our environment are interdependent on each other. They cannot survive all alone, but they depend on other organisms and they react. The whole of their life cycles are in link with the life cycle of other organisms and the physical structures of our environment as well. For example, rocks, for example, water, for example, air, etc. So, what do organisms require to survive? They require food, water, and shelter. Food to eat, water to carry away thirst, and shelter for protection. So these living organisms compete among each other. They struggle to survive in this world. They compete for certain limited resources. Those are food, water, shelter, sunlight. As the population of certain organisms increase in an area, they compete and there are some limiting factors. For an example, in desert areas, water is the limiting factor in nature, being a natural resource. So we have to use that limiting factor wisely. Similarly, there are certain biotic and abiotic factors which show limit. Therefore, that organism cannot exceed the limit of their growth. So there are certain relationship among these organisms. Predator-prey relationship, in which predator are those living organisms that eat the smallest or younger ones and they survive. For an example, a fox eats a rabbit to survive, and this is how they maintain a balance in the environment. So, the carrying capacity, there is a specific number, there's a limitation factor, that when two or more organisms are living together in an area, and we estimate that certain amount of organisms can survive in that area without the with the limiting factor. For example, if water is not available up to that extent, in which fish of more, a tank of 100 fish, so more fish in that tank cannot survive, it will be overcrowded, it will be difficult for the fish to breathe in that tank. So we have a limiting factor, and that is the carrying capacity of the environment. This is the term known as the carrying capacity of the natural resources. Now, reviewing the types of nutrition we eat: autotrophic and heterotrophic. Auto means automatic, those organisms which automatically develops or draws or formulate or produce their own food. Heterotrophic means those organisms which depend on other organisms for their food. These are the two kind of food habits which we will observe. So, populations. Populations are basically a key in through which organisms in an ecosystem work and grow and function. So, population has three categories, three levels. One is producers, the other one is consumers, and the third one is decomposers. Producers are those that produce their own food, that include the plant section. Consumers are those that depend on plants and other organisms for their food. And decomposers are those that deteriorate or break down the dead, decaying matter on land. That may include litter, the dead organisms, the millipedes, centipedes, and etc. These are the examples. A food chain. This is what happens, that a food chain is a way of flow of energy. This is what happens in an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, energy is transferred from one individual to another, but it cannot be wasted, but it travels in a circle. Let me explain this to you in a better way. For an example, we are having water, sun. The first section is the producers, and producers that are autotrophic, that includes grasses, plants, or fruiting trees. The consumers, the second diagram, that may include grasshoppers, sparrows, birds, or other organisms that depend on producers for their diet. Secondary consumers. Secondary consumers depend on primary consumers for their food. That may include snakes. Then the tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers may have hawks, foxes, and when they die, the fungi deteriorate them, decompose them, and then they become the part of the soil system as nutrients. So this is a complete cycle, and the whole process takes place in the presence of sunlight and water. A complete cycle of flow of energy. This is called a food chain. The food web. When two or more or many more food chains are interconnected with each other, it is known as a food web. Here you can see dragonfly eaten by sedge, that is eaten by algae, that is eaten by daphnia. So this is how different organisms and their life cycles and their food chains are interlinked with each other, forming a food web. The flow of energy you can see. Recycling. So this is basically a concept of recycling of nutrients, and the most important of them are decomposers that recycles these minerals and nutrients from the soil, from the organisms to the soil. You have to learn the short question and answers from your notes. You have to go through these terms and understand it by thoroughly reading it again and again and writing the text on your notebooks for practice purposes. We will continue our next lecture with a further detail of these topics. Thank you, class.